Because the last time around, when we did that, basically, provided a final copy to everyone, got some input prior from, those folks, and then if there was anything that, that came out of it that merited some type of revision or addendum, then that could have been done at that time, in which that did need to be. This time around, with this being sort of the final master plan, basically respecting the 30-day comment period, the idea was to have the draft copy that's available out there on the website and have some of the hard copies for those that don't have internet access, to be able to hopefully get some feedback and get some input during that comment period to then be able to produce the final report for distribution. And so part of it was to sort of respect the comment period. Another part was, to be quite frank, seemed a little more efficient than making a whole lot of copies, drafts to get out and then having to reproduce the final copies for everybody. And then you kind of have to worry about, is it the old draft or the new draft or whatever. So
is the copy on the internet PDF?
yes.
Yes.
So you can print that, it says draft on it, it has the time frame of the comment period on it, but I mean, that, that would be yours to have and to keep, but, printing the pretty slick bound stuff, we felt that was the best to go ahead and do that with the final copy and to be able to have those copies available. Yeah, it is quite costly to do that, and so, like I said, this was kind of a way to accommodate the comment period appropriately, because reality really needs to incorporate that feedback from the stakeholders as well as the public. And then also, again, just to sort of minimize the cost of doing two productions. I know it's been a long meeting and it's getting very late, so I'll kind of give you an overview. The open house that we're having tomorrow, not only is it sort of wrapping up the port master plan process, but it's sort of the, well, I'll be honest, sort of the awaited unveiling of the process of looking at potential roadway access to the Crystal City port site. As he mentioned, that is part of the our scope of work. Was all put together to do this phase 2, to do the master plan for the port site, and also to incorporate the necessary location study and environmental assessment, and possible access justification report to look at potential access to Crystal City. So basically what you're looking at is, like the other ports, as they had said, there is access to the interstate to the port facility. Crystal City's port site doesn't have that luxury. And so in order to sort of look at what all would we be taking into account, talk to the feds. They're willing to take the port as a given, if you will, as part of the assumption for the roadway. The port is operating, you need to have this roadway to have an operating port. To be able to look at doing a location study on where you would have roadway access, and then looking at the environmental impacts of doing that, so you can move through the process. Again, this is going through an NEPA process, anticipating federal funds for an endeavor like this, so you need to go through the process to do that. And part of that also includes the decision point about going forward, and I'll talk a little about that in terms of direct access to the interstate with a new interchange versus tying into the existing routes. And again, that's all part of the analysis. We've talked with MoDOT and FHWA since the beginning of this process. And basically what you want to do with any of these is you got to kind of define your point A and your point B. And so looking at the port itself, basically tying in all the roads. You notice there's a dotted line here, and you always have to look at a process comparing to what is often referred to as a no-build, or how do you get to the site, how would you get to the site today, so that you can look at the potential impacts. Not that you want any trucks going up and down Bailey Avenue to get to the port site, but you have to start with what roadway access is there today to be able to define what's called as your purpose and need for why you need a new roadway. So you have to start with that and say there is no good way to get to this port. This is what you're looking at, to get to that local site. So therefore, there is a purpose. There is a need to prompt you to look at different roadway access to get to the port. And so I wanted to be able to clarify that. And then also, when you're doing comparison of alternatives, when you're looking at various ways to get there, you want to be able to compare apples to apples. And so basically, the idea is that all of these roadways, in theory, would start at this point up here with the port and then head towards the interstate. The reason why there's two.
The red line is just a boundary line?
Yes, it is. If you saw the full map there, yeah, that's a study area boundary, is what that is. And basically, there's two potential access ports to the port site, because one would be potentially looking at going under the BNSF railroad. Obviously, that can't happen exactly as it exists today, so there'll be significant improvements to make that happen. But an under the railroad option, as well as having to go over the railroad. And again, so you can compare what makes the most sense, what's most cost effective, you know, which operates better to be able to get to that site. And then within that area, you basically would look at various places that you would look at new roadway corridor areas and existing roadway network to get you to the existing system. So whether that's, you know, looking at new roadway going directly to the interstate, or if it's looking at potential options or improvements to get you to, say, 61, 67 in order to get to an interchange. So basically looking at the potential access as it exists today, considering your contours and your elevations. Again, this roadway needs to be out of that floodplain as well. And then looking at your connections to the existing network. And then I talked about a decision point that also needs to happen. We spoke with MoDOT early in this process. Because of the spacing that exists today with the interchanges on Interstate 55, you would have to do what's called an access justification report to justify if you were to consider putting a new interchange on I-55. And the initial talks with FHWA and MoDOT were, we need you guys to look into this further, do a traffic study, come back and talk to us so that we can decide whether that's something that we feel comfortable with moving forward with, or if it really doesn't justify putting a new interchange in and instead, you know, looking at the whole system. And so the traffic engineers have been using, went out and did a lot of traffic counts, using a lot of existing data, looking at safety information, looking at congestion information, both now and, you know, in the 30-year planning horizon, projected truck volumes at full build-out of the operations of Crystal City, and basically have to look at how that would impact the entire network to be able to look at if you would justify having another interchange, or if you would need to tie in to the existing system using the outer road, or using 61, or using one of the other interchanges that are out there, to really make sure that you're making good sound decisions about how this impacts the entire network. You even have to go into looking at projecting sort of the split of the destination of those trucks, north and south on 55, because obviously that plays a big part in where that traffic will be going as well. So what we're starting on then is looking at this, the location study, starting that process with the public to talk about potential connections from that point A to point B. And basically what we do is you've already started working on the existing conditions, and you basically have to start with an alternatives analysis to look at those connections, refine those into various alternative alignments to be able to look at, and start looking at the profile as well as the layout. These right now are general corridors for connections, 200 to 250 feet of a swath to look at where you might go and what would you do there, and what elevation you need to be, and what could you connect to. And again, because it's an environmental process, you're looking at and quantifying what the impacts are of all of those various decisions to be able to lead to a process to get you to together have a locally preferred alternative. So that's kind of what we're going to be unveiling with the public tomorrow, is to be able to sort of talk about, this is what we're going to be doing, this is what we've completed with the port. Now we know a road to what, and so now we need to be able to go forward and look at, you know, what is the best use of public funds to provide a roadway access to that port facility.